the WBC welterweight champion. He fights out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, weighing in at 144 and 1/2 pounds, the very popular Wilfred Benitez.
At 67, Wilfred Benitez should be sitting down with reporters, naming his 5 toughest opponents, telling war stories from the golden age of boxing. But that's not happening. The truth is much harder to accept. The man once called El Radar, the youngest world champion in boxing history, can no longer speak at all. He lives in Chicago now, confined to a wheelchair, unable to walk or even feed himself. His sister Yvonne provides round-the-clock care. In late 2024, he was rushed to the intensive care unit and stayed there for days, with Yvonne by his side, night and day. At 67, Wilfred Benitez is a legend in need. This is the devastating reality the ravages of the ring have left behind. But here's what we can celebrate. Since Benitez cannot speak today, his career speaks for him, and what a voice it has. The 5 opponents we're about to explore represent the most remarkable arc in boxing history. From impossible teenage glory to battles with the greatest fighters who ever lived, these 5 fights tell the story of pure genius. This isn't just a list. This is the testament of a forgotten king, a man many have overlooked despite changing the sport forever. Let's honor Wilfred Benitez by examining the 5 defining battles that prove why he belongs among boxing's immortals. Before we dive into those legendary fights, you need to understand what made Benitez so special. They called him El Radar for a reason. He had an uncanny ability to foresee and dodge his opponent's blows with supernatural precision. He was also known as the Bible of boxing because he epitomized the sweet science like few others. Experts widely consider him one of the greatest defensive boxers of all time. This wasn't just skill, it was innate genius. But that genius came at a terrible price. Born in New York and raised in Puerto Rico, Benitez grew up in a family of fighters. His father and manager Gregorio Benitez turned him pro at just 15 years old. Gregorio later admitted he had to lie about his son's age to get him licensed. This was a boy fighting in a man's world. Even darker, his father would farm him out as a sparring partner from age 10 and collect the money. Young Wilfred spent his childhood sparring full-grown professionals. He had exceptionally violent sessions with world champion Esteban de Jesus. Here's the tragedy. The too many fights and too many punches absorbed that gave him the supernatural reflexes to become champion. At 17 are the same ravages of the ring that left him shot by 27. His prime wasn't just early. It was compressed into a few brilliant years. His defensive style made it worse. Benitez would often lie against the ropes, using his radar to make opponents miss by inches. This high-risk strategy meant that when he did get hit, it was often by opponents who had stepped in with full leverage. When the punishment from a lifetime of fighting began to slow those reflexes from 100% to 95%, he became vulnerable in ways an offensive fighter never would. His rise and his fall are not 2 separate stories. They're the same story. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of boxing's most overlooked legends, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling me which of Benitez's 5 opponents you think gave him the toughest fight. I read every single comment, and I love hearing your thoughts on boxing history. Now let's talk about the first pillar of his legacy. On March 6, 1976, something impossible happened. Wilfred Benitez, still a high school student, stepped into the ring at Hiram Bithorn Stadium in San Juan to challenge Antonio Cervantes. This was no ordinary champion. Kid Pambele was a hero in his native Colombia and a future Hall of Famer. He was widely considered one of the greatest junior welterweights in history. He was on a 19-fight win streak and had successfully defended his title 10 times. He was so dominant that people were discussing him as a potential opponent for Roberto Duran. Benitez, by contrast, was a 17-year-old fringe contender fighting in front of his high school classmates. He was a 4-1 underdog. The consensus was clear. The experience, power, and possibly superior speed of Cervantes would be too much for the young and inexperienced Puerto Rican. The fight itself was a strategic marvel. For the first several rounds, the veteran champion and the teenage challenger boxed evenly. But then, in the 5th round, something extraordinary happened. Benitez's extraordinary speed and skill surfaced. El Radar came alive. He took 4 consecutive rounds, jabbing smartly and making the champion miss with his hooks. Cervantes rallied late in the fight, but the prodigy's skill was simply too much. After 15 rounds, Benitez was awarded a split decision. One judge scored it for Cervantes, but the other 2 judges saw it as a wide, clear victory for Benitez. Contemporary analysis called him a clear winner who merely settled for a split decision. At 17 years, 5 months, and 23 days, Wilfred Benitez became the youngest world champion in boxing history. It's a record that, in the modern era of boxing, is going to be really difficult to break. At age 17 and a half, he was too young to appreciate history, but old enough to have made it. This victory proved his genius, but it also ensured he would never have a normal career. He had erased his prospect phase entirely, thrusting himself permanently into the deepest waters of the sport. After 3 defenses of his 140-pound title, Benitez vacated the belt and moved up to the shark-infested welterweight division. On January 14, 1979, he once again found himself in Puerto Rico, challenging another dominant, long-reigning, and future Hall of Fame champion. This was the classic showdown of experience versus youth. Carlos Palomino was a battle-tested warrior and a highly respected champion who had not tasted defeat in over 4 years. He was an intelligent, well-rounded technician who had successfully defended his title 7 times. Benitez, now 20, was the slick defensive wizard looking to prove his skills could translate to a higher weight class. The 15-round contest was, by all accounts, a technical masterpiece. It was a chess match between Palomino's intelligent, well-rounded attack and Benitez's sublime defensive skills and counterpunching. After the final bell, Benitez once again won his title via split decision. One judge scored it for Palomino, but the referee and another judge both saw Benitez as the clear victor. This victory is perhaps the most overlooked and most important of his career. The Cervantes win is famous for the age record. The Duran win is famous for the opponent, but the Palomino win was the bridge. It proved Benitez was not a 140-pound fluke. He had moved up, beaten a prime champion in his own weight class, and established himself as a 2-division titleist at age 20. Without this victory, he would never have been in the conversation for the Four Kings. The recurrence of the split decision verdict is also telling. It highlights a pattern. Benitez's defensive, counter-punching style, while brilliant, was often polarizing. Judges who favored raw aggression could and did score against him. This subtle, elusive genius of making champions miss is harder to appreciate than crude power, and it helps explain why he was so often forgotten in an era defined by offense. Benitez's victory over Palomino set the stage for one of the most anticipated fights of the era. On November 30th, 1979, at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, 2 undefeated, brilliant, and charismatic young champions would collide. It was a true super fight. This was the richest non-heavyweight bout in boxing history at the time. It was a clash of prodigies, both undefeated and in their athletic prime. But behind the scenes, Benitez's infamous lack of discipline was costing him. His own father and trainer, Gregorio Benitez, was so disgusted that he wrote an article for the Ring magazine titled, "Why Benitez Won't Win." In it, he claimed his son has not listened and would rather be out somewhere, anywhere, than in the gym. Years later, Benitez himself reportedly admitted to Leonard, "Ray, I did not train for that fight." Despite Benitez's lack of preparation, the fight was an incredible battle of skill and instant tactical adjustments. It was a dazzling high-speed chess match. Leonard, the Olympic darling, was shocked by Benitez's innate talent. At the post-fight press conference, Leonard marveled, "It was though I was looking into a mirror. No one, I mean no one, can make me miss punches like that." It was a close, tactical war. Leonard, the sharper and better conditioned man, scored a knockdown with a well-timed left jab in the 3rd round. Benitez, fighting on pure instinct, survived and continued to fight Leonard on near-even terms for the next 11 rounds. By the 15th and final round, Benitez was clearly behind on all 3 scorecards. He fought aggressively, but Leonard went toe-to-toe. With 30 seconds left, a Leonard left uppercut sent Benitez down to his knees. Though clearly hurt, Benitez rose, but after 2 more punches from Leonard, referee Carlos Padilla stopped the fight. The time was 2:54 of the 15th round. Wilfred Benitez was stopped with just 6 seconds left in the fight. It was his first professional loss. This loss is, ironically, the single greatest testament to Benitez's raw natural talent. That an admittedly untrained, undisciplined Benitez could take a peak, 100% focused Sugar Ray Leonard, one of the greatest fighters of all time, to the 15th round is staggering. It's the ultimate what-if of his career. There's crucial context that's often overlooked. 1 week before the fight, a boxer named Willie Klassen had died from injuries sustained in the ring. Historian Bert Sugar noted this was probably in the back of referee Carlos Padilla's mind when he stopped the bout. Leonard himself later said, "I don't question that." Benitez was beaten and would have lost the decision, but the final stoppage may have been hastened by a sport still grieving its most recent tragedy. After losing his welterweight title, Benitez moved up again. He captured the WBC light middleweight title from Maurice Hope in 1981. His second defense of that title on January 30th, 1982, would be his absolute pinnacle. He would face the legend, Roberto Hands of Stone Duran. This was a clash of 2 legendary champions, but their trajectories were opposite. Benitez at 23 was at the peak of his powers, a 3-division champion. Duran was a legend in crisis. He was still living down the humiliation of the no-mass fight against Leonard. His aura of invincibility was gone, and there were calls for Duran's retirement, with his own manager and trainer doubting he could continue. For the first time in a mega fight, Benitez was the 9-5 betting favorite. What followed was Benitez's masterpiece. This was El Radar in its purest form. Duran, whose entire style was built on relentless, brawling, terrifying aggression, was met with a defensive wall of pure genius. He struggled with El Radar's defensive genius and sharpshooting. Benitez's style was the perfect antidote to Duran's. He wanted Duran to attack, using his aggression against him, slipping punches, and delivering sharp counters. He completely neutralized Hands of Stone. After 15 rounds, Benitez won a clear, decisive, unanimous decision. It was a masterful boxing lesson, the single greatest performance of his career. He had stylistically dismantled one of the most feared fighters in history. This victory was so decisive that it almost ended Duran's career. Coming off no moss in this boxing lesson, Duran's team was ready to retire him. He would even go on to lose his next fight to a significant underdog, Kirkland Lang. This win was Benitez at his absolute zenith. He was the 154-pound king, a proven 3-division champion, and had just beaten a legend. Tragically, it would be his last great moment. 10 months later, on December 3rd, 1982, Benitez would defend his title again. His opponent was another of the four kings, the terrifying Thomas Hitman Hearns. The bout was the co-main event of a New Orleans megacard dubbed the Carnival of Champions. This was a massive event, held in the Louisiana Superdome. It was a clash of two 24-year-old titans. Hearns, the devastating puncher, was coming off his first loss to Leonard and had moved up to 154 pounds. Benitez was the established king of the division. The narrative was set, the Hitman versus El Radar. The fight defied all expectations. Hearns, known as a cannon to be rolled into a ring to reduce an opponent to rubble, did not brawl. In a shocking twist, he outboxed Benitez. As Sports Illustrated reported, Hearns finally showed that he brings more to boxing than a big bang. Hearns outboxed the master boxer. He used his enormous height and reach advantage, particularly his long jab, to keep Benitez at a distance. The fight's hidden story is one of incredible toughness from Hearns. The hitman injured his right hand in the 8th round. For the remaining 7 rounds, he was forced to fight using only his left hand. Benitez was credited with a knockdown in the 9th, but replays showed Hearns had slipped after Benitez stepped on his foot. After 15 rounds, Hearns won a majority decision. One judge scored it even, but the other 2 judges saw it for Hearns. This was a profound defeat. Benitez was not knocked out by the puncher. He was outboxed by him. This was the passing of the torch. The fact that a one-handed Hearns could hold off El Radar for 7 rounds is a testament to Hearns' greatness. But it's also the clearest signal that Benitez, at just 24, was already in decline. He no longer had the supernatural ability to adjust and capitalize on such a glaring weakness. This was the last great performance of Wilfred Benitez's career. His 5-fight war against the elite of his era was over. In just 3 years, he had engaged in 75 scheduled rounds of championship boxing against Leonard, Duran, and Hearns, on top of his 15-round wars with Cervantes and Palomino. The cumulative toll, built on a foundation of violent sparring since age 10, had been paid. The 5 fights that defined Wilfred Benitez tell a complete story. He was a 17-year-old giant killer against Cervantes. He was a 20-year-old 2-division master against Palomino. He was a 21-year-old mirror to a legend in his first defeat against Leonard. He was a 23-year-old genius at his absolute peak against Duran. And he was a 24-year-old king dethroned at his own game against Hearns. His story is the most extreme and tragic example of the compressed prime in boxing history. Pro at 15, champion at 17, 3-division champion, peaked at 23, last great fight at 24, shot by 27, and effectively finished as a fighter by 28. The glory, the millions, and his health were all gone. This arc connects directly to the inconvenient truth of his present. The man who was the Bible of boxing is now a legend in need, living in Chicago, entirely dependent on donations and the heroic 24-hour care of his sister Yvonne. Benitez must not be forgotten. He was not just a part of the Four Kings era. He was the 5th king, the essential gatekeeper to greatness. Leonard, Duran, and Hearns all built their legacies, in part, on their encounters with him. He was Leonard's first world title in his mirror. He was the acid test for Duran's post-no-mass comeback. He was the man Hearns had to outbox to prove he was more than a puncher. Wilfred Benitez cannot name his 5 toughest opponents. He doesn't have to. His career, and the 75 brutal rounds that defined it, have left a silent testament written on the history of the sport, and on his own body. When you watch footage of that 17-year-old kid making a Hall of Fame champion miss in San Juan, when you see him shutting down Roberto Duran at his peak, you're witnessing pure genius. You're seeing a fighter who sacrificed everything for the sweet science. And when you remember that sacrifice, you honor not just a champion, but a man who gave his entire life, from age 10 until today, to boxing. So here's what I want you to do. Share this video with someone who loves boxing history. Let's make sure Wilfred Benitez, El Radar, the Bible of boxing, is never forgotten again. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, And tell me in the comments which of these 5 fights you think best represents his genius. Because legends like Wilfred Benitez deserve to be remembered, celebrated, and honored. His career speaks for him, and it says he was one of the greatest to ever lace up gloves.